Most people think they're losing because life is hard. That's not the truth. They're losing because they walk into every battle already defeated, without knowing it. Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. If I dropped you into a moment of chaos right now, pressure, uncertainty, people watching, stakes high, would you stay calm, or would your emotions take control? Because that moment is coming, for all of us. The real problem isn't that battles show up uninvited. It's that nobody teaches you how to recognize one when it's happening. Most people don't fail loudly. They fail quietly, through hesitation, through bad decisions made in emotional moments, through reacting instead of thinking. And here's the part nobody talks about. You don't lose the battle when things go wrong. You lose it the moment you stop controlling yourself. Winning has very little to do with strength. It has everything to do with composure. The person who stays calm when everything feels out of control, that person dictates the outcome. So before we talk about winning, before we talk about discipline, fear, or resilience, understand this. Every battle you will ever face, every setback, every confrontation, every moment where everything is on the line, will be decided in one place first. Not out there, in here. And if you don't learn how to win that fight, no strategy, no motivation, no second chance will save you. Because the battle doesn't care who you are, it only responds to who you've trained yourself to be. So the question isn't whether battles are coming. The question is, will you recognize the moment, or will it recognize you first? Most people don't lose because they're weak. They lose because they're fighting the wrong thing. They wake up every day exhausted, frustrated, feeling like life is pushing back harder than they're pushing forward. And when you ask them what the problem is, they give vague answers. I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, nothing ever works out for me. But those aren't problems, those are symptoms. And when you treat symptoms instead of the source, the battle drags on forever. Before any real fight begins, there's always a moment of assessment. Professionals don't rush in fueled by emotion. They slow everything down. They observe. They strip the situation to its raw truth. Because charging blindly doesn't make you brave, it makes you predictable. And predictable people lose. If you don't define the battle, your emotions will define it for you. And emotions lie. They exaggerate threats, minimize responsibility, and convince you that everything is happening to you instead of because of something that can be changed. Most people think the battle is external. They blame the boss, the economy, their past, their upbringing, the system, the people around them. That's comfortable, because if the enemy is outside, then the responsibility is too. But comfort is expensive. It costs you control. The truth is, the most dangerous battles are rarely with other people. They are with habits you've normalized, behaviors you've excused, and patterns you refuse to confront. Procrastination, avoidance, ego, fear of discomfort, the need to be liked, the refusal to say no. These aren't personality traits. They are enemies, quiet ones. And because they don't announce themselves loudly, they do the most damage. Defining the battle means asking yourself hard, uncomfortable questions and refusing to accept easy answers. It means sitting still long enough to notice what you keep running from. Because whatever you avoid grows stronger. Whatever you ignore gains control. You say you want more discipline, but you don't define what's stealing your focus. You say you want confidence, but you don't define what keeps triggering self-doubt. You say you want success, but you don't define the behaviors that sabotage consistency. Vague goals lead to vague effort, and vague effort always loses. When pressure hits, the mind looks for shortcuts. It looks for stories that protect the ego. That's why people mislabel the battle. They say, I'm unlucky, instead of I'm unprepared. They say, I don't have time, instead of I don't prioritize. They say, I work better under pressure, instead of I avoid responsibility until pain forces action. Defining the battle requires brutal honesty. No theatrics, no self-pity, just facts. What exactly is happening? What do you control? What don't you? Where are you leaking energy? Where are you lying to yourself? Because once you name the real enemy, something shifts. Confusion disappears. Anxiety drops. The noise in your head quiets down. Not because the problem is gone, but because now you have direction. Direction is power. A defined battle gives you rules. It gives you boundaries. It tells you where to focus and where not to waste energy. Without that, you react to everything. Every opinion pulls you. Every obstacle feels personal. Every delay feels like failure. And you burn out fighting everything instead of winning something. Most people spend their lives shadowboxing, fighting imagined threats, arguing with people who aren't even in the room, replaying conversations that already ended, preparing speeches for battles that will never happen. Meanwhile, the real enemy, lack of discipline, lack of structure, lack of self-respect, walks free. You don't win by being busy. You win by being precise. Precision starts with defining what matters and what doesn't. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every fight deserves your energy. Some battles are distractions designed to pull you away from the real work. And if you don't define the battle, you'll fall for every trap. There's also something else people avoid when defining the battle: responsibility. Because once you admit what the real problem is, you lose the luxury of excuses. You can't hide behind confusion anymore. You can't pretend you didn't know. Clarity demands action, and action exposes effort. That's why many people stay stuck. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they're afraid of what defining the battle will require of them. Change, sacrifice, discomfort, consistency. But here's the truth. Undefined battles never end. They drain you slowly, they follow you everywhere, they show up in your work, your relationships, your confidence, your sleep. You feel like you're always fighting, but you're never winning. The moment you define the battle, you stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming a strategist. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is required from me? That shift alone separates people who survive from people who lead. A clear battle doesn't guarantee victory, but an unclear one guarantees defeat. Because when the pressure rises, and it will, you won't have time to figure things out. You will act on instinct. And your instincts are shaped by what you've already defined as important. So take the time most people avoid. Sit with the discomfort, identify the real fight, strip away emotion, blame, and noise. Call the enemy by its real name, because once the battle is defined, it stops owning you. And for the first time, you're no longer just reacting to life. You're preparing to win. Pressure doesn't arrive politely. It doesn't warn you. It doesn't wait until you feel ready. It shows up fast, loud, and unforgiving, and in that moment, everything you thought you were becomes irrelevant. What matters is how you respond when your heart rate spikes, your breathing shortens, and your thoughts start racing ahead of reality. Most people believe pressure breaks them. That's not accurate. Pressure exposes Hat's already there. It reveals how well or how poorly you've trained your mind. When things go wrong, the body reacts before the mind can catch up. Adrenaline floods your system, vision narrows, time feels distorted. This is where untrained minds lose control. They rush, they overreact, they make emotional decisions, and then spend months or years paying the price for a few uncontrolled seconds. The first skill of mastering your mind under pressure is learning to slow everything down internally, even when the outside world feels like it's speeding up. You may not be able to control the situation, but you can always control your response. And response is where power lives. Your breath is the gateway. When pressure hits, most people breathe shallow and fast without realizing it. That sends a signal to the brain that danger is overwhelming, which increases panic. The disciplined individual does the opposite. They breathe deliberately, deep, controlled breaths, in through the nose, slow out through the mouth. That simple act tells the brain, I'm still in control. Calm doesn't mean the situation is safe. It means you are steady enough to handle it. Once breathing stabilizes, thinking follows. Clear thinking under pressure is not about brilliance. It's about simplicity. The mind wants to jump to worst-case scenarios, replay mistakes, imagine future consequences. That mental noise is deadly. You don't need to solve everything. You only need to solve what's directly in front of you. Ask yourself one question: what's the next right action? Not the perfect one, not the safest one. The next right one. People who fail under pressure often do so because they try to control too much at once. They panic because they're thinking 10 steps ahead while tripping over the first step. Mastery means narrowing your focus until the chaos fades into the background. One decision, one movement, one moment. Emotional control is another battlefield entirely. Pressure triggers emotion, anger, fear, frustration, embarrassment. These emotions aren't the enemy. Letting them drive your behavior is. The moment emotion takes the wheel, logic exits the vehicle. Anger makes you reckless. Fear makes you freeze or flee. Ego makes you defend instead of adapt. Mastery means noticing the emotion without becoming it. You acknowledge it quietly. I feel fear. I feel anger. And then you proceed anyway. You don't suppress it and you don't indulge it. You let it exist without giving it authority. This is where preparation matters. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall back on what you've practiced. If your daily life is reactive, emotional, undisciplined, then pressure will amplify those traits. But if you practice calm, control, and clarity when things are easy, those skills show up when things are hard. That's why training under stress is essential. Voluntary discomfort builds involuntary strength. When you put yourself in challenging situations intentionally, physically, mentally, emotionally, you reduce the shock when real pressure arrives. The mind learns, I've been here before. I can function here. Another critical element is self-talk. Under pressure, your internal dialogue becomes louder and more aggressive. For many people, it turns hostile. You're messing this up. You're not good enough. Everyone's watching. That voice is not truth. It's habit. And habits can be retrained. Replace chaos with commands, short, direct instructions. Breathe, slow down, focus, handle this. You don't need motivation speeches in the middle of pressure. You need clarity. Your mind responds to authority, especially when it's under stress. Be that authority. Time perception is another trap. Under pressure, everything feels urgent. The mind convinces you that you have no time, which leads to rushed decisions. In reality, most critical mistakes happen not because there was no time, but because someone believed there wasn't. Stillness creates time. Even a half-second pause before acting can change outcomes. That pause is where awareness returns. That pause is where you reclaim control. Mastering your mind also means accepting uncertainty. Pressure is uncomfortable because outcomes are unclear. People want guarantees. Pressure offers none. The mentally strong don't need certainty. They need adaptability. They don't cling to a single plan. They stay flexible, adjusting as new information appears. When something goes wrong under pressure, many people spiral into self-judgment. They mentally quit before the situation is over. That's fatal. One mistake doesn't end the battle unless you decide it does. Recovery speed matters more than perfection. Can you reset fast? Can you refocus immediately? Can you let go of what already happened and stay present? Presence is the ultimate weapon under pressure. Not the past, not the future, now. Right now is where decisions are made. Right now is where control exists. And here's the truth most people avoid. Pressure is not something to eliminate. It's something to master. If you avoid pressure, you avoid growth. If you run pressure, you train your mind to panic when it arrives. But if you face it, train within it, and learn to function calmly inside it, pressure becomes an advantage. Because when everyone else is rushing, panicking, reacting, you're thinking, you're breathing, you're choosing, and that is how battles are won, not with force, not with emotion, but with a mind that remains steady when everything else is shaking. That's not talent, that's training. Most people wait to feel ready. They wait for motivation to show up like a signal, like a surge of energy that suddenly makes everything easy. And when it doesn't come, they tell themselves tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow they'll feel better. Tomorrow they'll be motivated. Tomorrow they'll start. Tomorrow becomes a habit. And habits decide outcomes. Motivation is emotional. It's tied to mood, environment, sleep, praise, excitement. That makes it unreliable. Some days it shows up strong, other days it disappears completely. And life doesn't pause just because your motivation did. The battles still come. The responsibilities still exist. The standard is still there. Discipline doesn't care how you feel. That's why it works. Discipline is a decision made in advance. It's choosing what you will do before emotions get a vote. It's structure. It's routine. It's showing up when the excitement is gone and the results are still far away. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think it's about punishment or restriction. It's not. Discipline is freedom. It removes decision fatigue. When you're disciplined, you don't wake up negotiating with yourself. You already know what needs to be done. That clarity saves energy, time, and mental bandwidth. Motivation asks, do I feel like it? Discipline asks, what's required? And when pressure hits, only one of those questions matters. The reason discipline wins battles is because battles don't ask for enthusiasm. They demand execution. They don't care about intention. They care about consistency. The person who trains when it's boring, who prepares when no one is watching, who does the work without applause, that person shows up ready when it counts. Discipline is built in the small, unglamorous moments. The alarm clock, the workout when you're tired, the task you don't feel like doing, the conversation you'd rather avoid. These moments seem insignificant, but they stack, and over time they create reliability. Reliability is power. When you're disciplined, you trust yourself. You know you'll follow through. You know you won't quit at the first sign of discomfort. That trust builds confidence. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that doesn't need validation. Motivation can make you start. Discipline makes you finish. And finishing is what separates people who talk from people who win. Discipline also creates emotional stability. When your actions are governed by routine instead of feeling, your mood stops dictating your behavior. You stop riding emotional highs and lows. You become steady, predictable to yourself. And that steadiness is dangerous in a world full of inconsistency. People often say they lost motivation, as if it was taken from them. In reality, they lost structure. They stopped doing the small things that reinforced momentum. Discipline restores momentum even when you don't feel progress yet. Another truth most people avoid: discipline is uncomfortable by design. If it feels easy, it's probably not discipline, it's convenience. Discipline requires sacrifice, time, comfort, ego. You will have to do things you don't want to do. That's the price. But that price is far smaller than the cost of regret. Regret is heavier than discipline. Regret lasts longer. Regret doesn't go away when you finally feel motivated again. Discipline is also how you earn respect, from others, but more importantly, from yourself. Every time you do what you said you would do, you reinforce identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. Identity drives behavior. When you identify as disciplined, quitting feels unnatural. Making excuses feels out of character. That internal standard becomes your guardrail. Motivation never builds identity. Discipline does. In high-pressure situations, motivation disappears first. Stress, fear, fatigue, they drain emotion fast. Discipline remains because it's not emotional, it's procedural. You follow the steps because that's what you do. You don't debate, you execute. That's why disciplined people perform better under pressure. They don't rise and fall with how inspired they feel. They rely on systems, habits, training. This is why preparation matters more than desire. Desire without discipline is noise. Discipline without desire still produces results. And here's the part people resist. Discipline is a skill. It's trained, not inherited. No one starts disciplined. They become disciplined through repetition, through failing and recommitting, through doing the hard thing even when it feels pointless. You don't need to overhaul your entire life to build discipline. You start small. One promise kept, one task completed, one routine followed. Discipline grows when you stop breaking agreements with yourself. Every broken promise weakens discipline. Every kept promise strengthens it. That's why you must be careful with what you commit to. Set standards you can uphold. Then uphold them relentlessly. Discipline also protects you from external chaos. When the world is unstable, your routines become anchors. When circumstances change, your standards don't. That stability allows you to adapt without losing yourself. Motivation will come and go. That's normal. Waiting for it is optional. The people who win consistently are not more excited than you. They are more disciplined. They act when it's boring, they act when it's hard, they act when no one is watching. And when the battle arrives, when everything is on the line and excuses no longer matter, they don't look for motivation, they move, because discipline already decided for them. Fear shows up before every meaningful moment. Right before you step into uncertainty, right before you risk something that matters, right before you're tested. And most people misunderstand it. They treat fear like an enemy, something to eliminate, something to outrun or suppress. But fear doesn't disappear just because you tell it to. In fact, the harder you fight fear, the more control it takes. Fear is not a flaw in your system. It is the stem working. It exists to keep you alert, to sharpen your senses, to prepare your body for action. The problem is not fear itself. It's the relationship you have with it. When fear is misunderstood, it becomes paralysis. When it's understood, it becomes precision. Most people spend their lives trying to be fearless. That's a fantasy. Fearless people don't exist. What exists are people who learned how to move while fear is present. They don't wait for confidence to arrive. They don't expect calm before taking action. They accept fear as part of the process and step forward anyway. Fear is information. It tells you that something matters. If you feel no fear, you're either avoiding growth or you're numb. Growth and fear travel together. One does not show up without the other. The moment you stop treating fear as a threat and start treating it as data, everything changes. Instead of asking, how do I make this go away? You ask, what is this telling me? Is it telling you to prepare more, to slow down, to pay attention, to respect the situation? Fear sharpens awareness if you let it. The body reacts to fear before the mind has time to explain it. Heart rate increases, muscles tense, focus narrows. That reaction isn't weakness, it's readiness. But without training, that readiness turns into panic. With training, it turns into performance. The key is exposure. You don't conquer fear by avoiding it. You don't conquer it by positive thinking. You conquer it through familiarity. Repeated exposure teaches the nervous system that fear does not equal danger, it equals challenge, and challenge is survivable. That's why voluntary discomfort is so powerful. When you choose to do hard things when you don't have to, you teach your mind that fear is not a stop sign, it's a signal to engage. Over time, the intensity decreases, not because fear disappears, but because your capacity increases. People who crumble under fear often haven't failed too much. They've avoided too much. They've insulated themselves from discomfort. So when fear finally shows up, it feels overwhelming. The mind panics because it has no reference point. Those who perform under pressure have been here before. Not exactly here, but close enough. They've felt the nerves, the doubt, the tight chest, and they've moved anyway. Their confidence isn't bravado, it's familiarity. Another mistake people make is trying to eliminate fear before acting. They say, once I feel confident, I'll do it. Confidence is built after action, not before it. Fear comes first, action follows, confidence comes last. Waiting for fear to disappear is another form of avoidance. Fear also XP, osis ego. It reveals what you're attached to, your image, your reputation, your comfort. When fear spikes, ask yourself what you're protecting. Often, it's not your safety, it's your pride. Letting go of ego reduces fear's grip. When you accept that mistakes are possible, embarrassment is survivable, and failure is not fatal, fear loses leverage. It no longer controls you through imagined consequences. Fear thrives in uncertainty. The unknown is its favorite environment. The antidote isn't certainty, it's preparation. You prepare for what you can control and accept what you can't. That balance keeps fear from spiraling. Preparation doesn't mean guaranteeing success, it means reducing chaos. Training, rehearsing, planning, building skill. Each layer of preparation turns fear into focus. You stop imagining everything that could go wrong and start concentrating on execution. Your inner dialogue matters here. When fear hits, most people amplify it with catastrophic thinking. What if I fail? What if I freeze? What if I look stupid? That mental noise fuels fear. Replace questions with commands, short, grounding statements. Breathe, slow down, stay present, do the next thing. Fear listens to authority. If you don't provide it, fear will. There's also a deeper truth people resist. Fear never goes away at higher levels. It changes form. Beginners fear failure. Experienced people fear responsibility. Leaders fear the cost of decisions. Growth doesn't remove fear, it upgrades it. So if you're afraid, you're not behind. You're likely right where you're supposed to be. Using fear means allowing it to sharpen you without letting it steer you. It means feeling the surge and still see. Choosing your actions consciously. Fear can make you reckless or precise. The difference is training. And here's the final reality. Every battle you'll ever face will involve fear. Not because you're weak, but because it matters. If it didn't matter, fear wouldn't show up. So stop trying to kill fear. Train with it, study it, let it sharpen you. Because when fear shows up and you know how to function inside it, something powerful happens. While others freeze, while others retreat, while others wait for confidence, you move. Not because fear is gone, but because it no longer controls you. That's not fearlessness. That's mastery. Most people think the battle ends when the noise stops, when the argument is over, when the deal is done, when the crisis passes, when the pressure eases. They believe survival is the same as victory. It isn't. What happens after the battle determines whether you actually won or whether you're about to fight the same war again. The aftermath is where most people fail. not because they are incapable, but because they're exhausted, emotional, and impatient to move on. They want relief, not reflection. They want comfort, not correction. And that's how lessons are missed and patterns repeat. Winning the aftermath starts with recovery, not escape, not denial. Recovery is deliberate. It's the ability to come down from intensity without collapsing into avoidance. High stress leaves residue, mentally, emotionally, physically. If you don't address it, it leaks into the next challenge. Recovery doesn't mean weakness, it means maintenance. Just like a machine pushed to its limits needs inspection, so does the mind. You slow down enough to let the nervous system reset. You regain perspective, you sleep, you breathe. You allow the body to stabilize so the mind can think clearly again. People who refuse to recover properly stay in a constant state of tension. They call it toughness, but it's actually erosion. Over time, that constant pressure dulls judgment, shortens patience, and increases emotional reactivity. You don't get stronger by never resting. You get reckless. Once the body settles, reflection begins. This is the part most people avoid because it requires honesty without self-destruction. Reflection is not replaying mistakes on a loop, it's analysis, calm, objective. You ask questions without emotion attached. What went right? What went wrong? What did I underestimate? What did I overestimate? Where did emotion interfere? Where did preparation help? Where did it fail? There is no blame here. Blame is useless. Responsibility is powerful. If you won, reflection keeps you humble and sharp. If you lost, reflection keeps you from repeating it. Either way, skipping reflection guarantees stagnation. Many people rush past this phase because they're afraid of what they'll find. They fear guilt, regret, or self-judgment. But avoiding reflection doesn't erase mistakes, it buries them. And buried problems don't disappear. They resurface later, louder and more expensive. True reflection requires separating identity from outcome. You are not your last performance. You are the sum of what you learn from it. When you can look at failure without defining yourself by it, you gain leverage. You can extract lessons without carrying shame. This is where emotional maturity shows. Immature minds either celebrate too long or punish themselves endlessly. Both are distractions. Professionals acknowledge the outcome, learn what's necessary, and move forward adjusted. Reflection must lead to readiness. Otherwise, it's just contemplation. Readiness is about preparation for what's next, not obsession with what's past. It's taking the lessons learned and turning them into changes, behavioral, strategic, mental. Readiness means you don't reset to zero after every battle. You evolve, you refine systems, you adjust routines, you improve skills, you reinforce discipline where it held and strengthen it where it cracked. You don't wait for the next challenge to expose weaknesses again. You address them while things are calm. Calm is when preparation is easiest. Crisis is when it's too late. Most people relax completely after a battle. They drop standards, they loosen structure, they tell themselves they've earned it. Some rest is necessary, but abandoning discipline is dangerous. Readiness doesn't mean staying tense, it means staying intentional. You remain alert without being anxious. You stay sharp without being paranoid. Another critical part of the aftermath is emotional closure. Unresolved emotion bleeds into future decisions. Anger turns into impulsiveness. Bitterness turns into cynicism. Pride turns into complacency. You have to close the emotional loop. That doesn't mean suppressing feelings, it means acknowledging them, processing them, and letting them go. Carrying emotional weight from past battles slows reaction time in future ones. You can't afford that. Letting go is not forgetting. It's choosing not to relive what no longer serves you. Readiness also means reestablishing routine. Aft. Our chaos. Structure restores stability. Simple habits. Consistent sleep. Training, work, order in small things rebuilds confidence in large ones. Routine reminds the mind that control still exists. People who fail in the aftermath often drift. They lose momentum. They feel unanchored. That drift makes the next battle harder because confidence erodes quietly. Winners don't drift. They reset. There's also humility in readiness. You assume another challenge is coming. Not because you're pessimistic, but because life is dynamic. You don't live in fear of the next battle, but you respect its inevitability. That respect keeps you prepared. The aftermath is also where character is revealed. Anyone can act brave in the heat of the moment. Few can remain disciplined once the spotlight fades, once the adrenaline is gone, once no one is watching. That's when true strength shows. You don't boast about wins. You don't dramatize losses. You quietly get better. Winning the aftermath means you don't need external validation to move forward. You don't wait for praise or permission. You self-correct. You self-regulate. You self-lead. And here's the reality. Most people never understand the aftermath determines your ceiling. Not talent, not ambition, not intensity. How well you recover, reflect, and prepare again determines how far you go. Those who rush recovery burn out. Those who avoid reflection repeat mistakes. Those who neglect readiness get surprised again and again. Those who master the aftermath become dangerous. Not because they never fall, but because every fall makes them better prepared for the next fight. Battles are inevitable. Growth is optional. The ones who keep winning are not the loudest or the luckiest. They are the ones who understand that the fight doesn't end when it's over. It ends when you're ready for the next one. And readiness is the real victory. Every battle you will ever face will demand something from you. Not your comfort, not your excuses, not your intentions. It will demand your discipline, your composure, your willingness to take responsibility when no one is forcing you to. You don't win because life gets easier. You win because you get sharper. The battle will never ask if you're ready. It will never wait for motivation. It will never care how hard the last one was. But it will always expose who you've trained yourself to be. If you define the battle clearly, pressure loses its power. If you master your mind, chaos becomes manageable. If you choose discipline over emotion, consistency becomes your advantage. If you learn to work with fear, it sharpens you instead of stopping you. And if you win the aftermath, every battle, win or lose, moves you forward. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being prepared. Because the strongest people aren't the loudest, they're the calmest. They don't rush, they don't panic, they don't quit. They stand steady when everything shakes. So when the next battle shows up, and it will, you don't ask why it's happening. You don't wait to feel ready. You breathe, you focus, you move, not because you're fearless, but because you're trained. And that is how you stop surviving battles and start winning them.